Today is day 23 of my instant ramen challenge, and it's starting off with a bit of a fail. You see, what had happened was that I threw this bitter melon in the freezer because I wasn't ready to cook it yet. But when I took it out, it was all mushy because this thing has a ton of water content. So the first thing I did was attempt to draw out the water by cutting it up into chunks and then removing the insides. But that wasn't really working, so I sliced it up into smaller pieces, thinking it would just be better this way. Once I had that sliced up and the insides removed, I added some more salt and gave it a toss, and into the fridge it went until the next morning. It was still looking quite plump, so I decided to salt it just a little bit more and put it on a wire rack. Just going to leave this on the counter until I'm ready to cook it in a few hours. You might be wondering what the heck I'm trying to make, and it all started with these tofu shirataki noodles that I got on the ice cream day. I only bought it because I wanted the spicy miso seasoning. Well, I tried one of the packages of the noodles, and the first thing it reminded me of were of glass noodles, which is used in a variety of dishes, but bitter melon soup came to mind first. So I asked my mom to send me her recipe, and she sent me some videos that I'm basing this recipe off of. I gave the noodles a few good rinses and cut them up. Next, I rehydrated some dried black fungus, aka wood ear mushrooms. Just put it in warm water. Diced up half a yellow onion, and this is how the mushrooms look after 15 minutes. Just roughly chop those up. Next was preparing the filling. My mom didn't give me specific measurements. She was like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, so I'm just kind of guesstimating. Also, shout out to my neighbor for gifting me a box of gloves for Christmas. A pound of ground pork, the noodles, about half the mushrooms, and the yellow onion. While I mixed that up, I realized I should have cut the noodles more, so I kind of alternated between mixing and cutting. For seasoning, I added a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of sugar, and I also have this instant ramen seasoning packet from one of the days last week. I think it's slightly spicy and tangy. Gave that all a good mix and then went to stuffing the bitter melon slices. Obviously, they should have been bigger so I could stuff them better, but you can't unslice things, so I learned my lesson for next time. 9 years later, I was done stuffing them all, and afterwards I realized I forgot to add fish sauce to the meat. Just don't tell my mom. Everything is fine. Oil in my Dutch oven pan on medium-high heat and placing the pieces in. My goal is to brown it a little bit to get some extra flavor in the broth, and it sounds cool to say I browned the meat. It just sounds like something a chef would say, you know? There were some pieces that didn't make the browning cut, but I didn't want to leave them out. I'm adding some veggie broth instead of water since I had a bottle in the pantry, and for the seasoning, I'm going to use the packet from these mama noodles. I just gently mixed it in because I didn't want to disturb the meat and pop it out of the bitter melon socket. Let it simmer, cover, and this is how it looks 30 minutes later. That time frame wasn't part of the instructions, it's just how long it took me to do the frickin' dishes. So the meat has kind of separated from the melon, but pretty much staying intact. Looks pretty good. I cooked up the noodles, and I totally forgot this package has another packet inside. I really should know better because I used to eat the shrimp version of these noodles all the time. After I fished that out and realized I have yet another packet to figure out how to use up, I added the broth to the drained noodles. This video wasn't supposed to be this long, but I just wanted to walk through my thought process with you all, by the way. I garnished with some chopped green onions, and this is the final product. The broth was extremely bitter. Maybe it's because I haven't had it in a while, or I just didn't cook it like how my mom does. I guess I grew up eating it with rice, which helped. The noodles for sure did. I enjoyed the flavor of the broth since it was pretty rich. The bitter melon was even more bitter than the broth, and it was just a tad bit too salty, and I mean, I'm to blame for that for my attempt at drawing out the water. Overall, I'm happy with how it turned out. It makes me feel less intimidated cooking this vegetable. I also felt very healthy eating it.